First, the USDA's Justice for All non-discriminatory statement, which simply states that all persons must be treated equally without regard to their race, color, national origin, sex, religious creed, disability, age, political beliefs, or reprisal or retaliation for prior civil rights activity, and that our institution provides an inclusive space for all. For more information on the And Justice for All statement, please visit the USDA's website.
Hi everyone, I'm Christina. I'm a project manager with ISLES. We're a community development and environmental nonprofit based in Trenton, New Jersey. What I typically do is I work with schools managing all of our farm to school programming, and that looks like helping support school gardens, teaching kids about where their food comes from, how it's grown, and then helping teachers link up school gardens to curriculum to make it really useful to you. And I want to say thank you to Rutgers Cooperative Extension of Mercer County, the Department of Family and Community Health Sciences, and Staff Ed Program for helping us host this workshop today. So if you saw our event advertisement, we were going to do an event all about cabbage at Fernbrook Farm that was going to show, and I was going to show you how cabbage is grown in the wintertime and a little bit about sustainable growing practices. You might have looked out your window this morning and noticed that it snowed. So like everyone else, I am stuck at home. I couldn't get my car out of the driveway. So we are in my kitchen today instead of at a farm. But I promise you it's going to be just as exciting. And then hopefully next month or in February, we'll still get to visit the farm and we'll learn about a different vegetable. But anyway, moving forward, today our workshop is all about cabbage. Cabbage is a vegetable that is actually grown in New Jersey, and it can still be grown even in the wintertime. So if you were to go to a farmer's market, we went to Trenton Farmer's Market last month, you can buy cabbage that was grown in New Jersey because it still does really well in the wintertime. It's not going to grow as much, there's not as much sunlight. You would have to grow it in something called a hoop house, but it'll still grow, and it's actually a little bit sweeter in the winter. So today what we're doing is we're going to make fermented cabbage. We're going to make sauerkraut, and I'm sure lots of you have heard of sauerkraut before. You might have tried sauerkraut. The sauerkraut that you get in the grocery store, it's probably going to taste very different than what we're going to make today, but we're making a fermented food. So, what is a fermented food? I'm just getting all my stuff ready. Fermented foods are foods that have bacteria in them. So, our cabbage, I'm going to explain this process. This is a fun way to kind of combine science and also cooking. So all of our fruits and vegetables, including cabbage, have bacteria on them, good bacteria that we need. And that bacteria is called lactobacillus. And the lactobacillus, we need that for our gut, and it helps us have a healthy, it's called a microbiome. So it makes our microbiome healthy, and it's good for our digestion. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create a brine, and I'll show you how to do that, to help the lactobacillus, the good bacteria. They're going to convert sugar in the cabbage into, it's going to help prevent the bad bacteria from growing. So we have our cabbage, and I'll start showing you that process, and I'll talk you through a little bit more of how fermentation works as we go through it. We're using 1 head of cabbage. I already started some earlier because I wanted to show you part of the process, but usually a cabbage is about 5 pounds. If you're not sure how much it weighs, you can weigh it at the grocery store or the farmer's market. You want to use a really fresh piece of cabbage for this, and preferably organic if you have access to it, because that's going to have more of the good bacteria on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this cabbage really thin. I'm cutting it in quarters, and this is not food safe, so I'm going to move my cat and wash my hands again after I touch him. Sir. But this is just for me, so we're not sharing it with anyone. All right, let me wash my hands. After I touch an animal, I want to wash my hands. in making this, I should have mentioned, is also washing your hands with warm soapy water and washing all of your materials with that water also. So I'm going to cut my cabbage into quarters, and there's a core right here. I want to remove that core. I do it just by using my knife and cutting the bottom off. Same thing here. Okay, and then I'm going to cut it really thin. And you can also use a mandolin or a food processor to do this, but I'm just going to use my knife. Nice thin pieces. We'll do the other side. When I'm using my knife, I'm watching my fingers. I'm paying close attention to what I'm doing. And this, if you are a child watching this video, you want to have an adult help you with this part. Okay, so we have all of our cabbage. That's going to go into a bowl. And then we're going to add salt to it. Here's the rule with adding salt. For every 5 pounds of cabbage, you add 3 tablespoons of salt. So I started with a 5-pound cabbage. I cut it in half, so we're going to use 1.5 tablespoons of salt. So I'm going to measure. Using a sea salt is really good. You don't want to use an iodized salt because that's not going to work well with the bacteria. All right, so I'm adding this in, and we'll do a half. And you can judge. You might need a little bit more. You can always add more. You can't take away, so we start with small amounts. Okay, and now here's the fun part. You're going to massage the salt into the cabbage. So that's why we're starting with clean hands, and we're going to push. And you can, maybe we can get a close-up of what this looks like. All right, and then I see some of the big pieces, so I'm just going to break those up. So I would kind of do this for a few minutes. And what the salt is going to do is it's going to help extract all of the water in my cabbage. And that is going to be my brine. So I would massage this for maybe a few minutes. And then I leave it for about an hour. And after an hour, you'll start to see some of the water coming out of it. Okay, let me rinse off my hands. And the cabbage will actually start to shrink in size. So here's some cabbage that I did about an hour ago. If you see really closely, some of that water is starting to come out of it. You can see right over there. So that's what we want. So I'm gonna take that. I like to add some flavor to my sauerkraut. You don't have to do this. And whatever flavor you do add, you wanna add just a small amount because the fermentation process is going to make those flavors really strong. So for mine, I'm adding some mustard seed. I'm adding about 1/2 teaspoon. That's enough. I'm adding some jalapenos because I want mine to be spicy. And then I'm adding just 1 clove of garlic. And this is the only time you'll ever hear me say in a recipe that I'm only adding 1 clove of garlic because I like garlic and I usually want a lot of it. So we mix this up. And then we're going to add it to a jar. You want to use a really large jar and you want a wide lid. So I'm going to add this in. And the reason for that is as your cabbage ferments, you're going to see all this bacteria, this activity from the bacteria. So it's going to start bubbling and you want to have enough room for that gas to escape. Otherwise, your container could explode. So we don't want that happening. Add this. And of course, if you had a funnel or something wider, that's perfectly fine. And so as I'm adding this, I'll explain a little bit more about the process. So you have your bacteria, lactobacillus. That bacteria likes what's called an anaerobic environment. So you might be familiar with the word aerobic because we talk about aerobic exercises. That means with air. So anaerobic is the opposite. It means without air. So the bacteria needs to be submerged underwater. And so And that's going to prevent any of the bad bacteria from growing. And this good bacteria, this is going to help you, this is really beneficial. It helps you with your gut. For a really long time, people have been fermenting foods all over the world. So one of the things that we would do before refrigeration is fermentation, because this is going to make our food last a lot longer. If I had my cabbage on a shelf in my house, it'll rot probably in a few days, maybe a week. With my fermented food, it can last up to months. So before we had refrigeration, before we had electricity, this is one way people used to store food during the winter time. And we didn't really know about it until recently. There's a lot of research that shows that fermented food is actually really healthy for us. It has all sorts of benefits. It helps our immune system, so it's actually great to have around. All right, so I have my cabbage in here. I'm gonna pour the water that's in here into my container. And you usually would wait a little bit longer. You'd wait about an hour. It'll start to get more water. For the purposes of this video, I'm just gonna add a little bit of water to show you what it should look like. And you could add a little bit of water if you need to. Make sure it's filtered. I have my water filter on. And I'm using cool water, not freezing cold, but not hot. Okay. So normally, your cabbage would start to release a ton of water once we let it sit for a while. And it'll do this once you put it in the jar over time, but I just want to show you how it works here. So we want to create that anaerobic environment. So I'm going to use my hands to push all of the cabbage under this water. Okay, I don't want any pieces floating up top because that's how I get mold, and the kind of mold that I don't want to eat. And we want to keep this submerged. So you can do a lot of different things to keep it submerged, but one of the things I do is I'll take the outside leaves of the cabbage and I tuck them in so that none of the cabbage pieces could float up top. On this side, I might have to break it up a little bit. And more water will form over time. So let's make sure everything is tucked in so that my cabbage can start doing its thing. And then another thing that I can do if you want to be extra careful, there are weights sold in stores specifically for fermentation, but this is just a paper weight I'm going to use to hold the cabbage down. Okay, so that's pretty much it. And then here's what you're going to do. You need to keep this in a room temperature environment. If it's too cold, you're not going to get a lot of bacteria activity. If it is too hot, it's actually going to kill off some of the bacteria. So we want it to be about 70 to 75 degrees. It's winter, so it's a little bit cooler. If it's cooler in your house, it might take a little bit longer to ferment, but that's okay. You're going to leave it for about 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, you're starting to get like a sour flavor. Other fermented foods include yogurt or cheese. You might be familiar with that kind of sour flavor from those foods. So you'll leave it for 2 weeks, but you're going to check on it every single day. So here's what you're looking for when you're checking on it. You're looking to make sure that all your cabbage still is submerged, that nothing floated up. You'll see I'm taking off a few pieces that kind of floated. So you're going to make sure nothing floated up. You're going to start to see bubbles and you're going to start to see a foam on top. That's normal. That's the bacteria and the yeast being really active. But if that bothers you, you can just scrape it off. And then if you see any mold, that's a sign that it's not working. You should probably get rid of it. Some people scrape it off, but I think just to be safe, you want to get rid of it. But as long as you're checking on it, it's fine. Now, if the bacteria are going to be producing gas. So if I have a lid on here and it's really tight and I don't open it for a while, that pressure is going to build up and it could explode. So if you choose to put a lid on it, you have to open it at least once a day, maybe a few times a day, and then close it to let that gas escape. If you don't want to do that, you can cover this with a cloth. A cheesecloth works really well, and a rubber band, or even a cheesecloth in a mason jar rim, and that will allow the gas to escape, and it'll prevent anything from falling into your fermentation. So after 2 weeks, this will be ready, and you'll be able to enjoy it. And so you can use this, you don't need a lot to get the benefits from it. You can use it as a condiment the way that you would use pickles, put it on sandwiches, put it on salads, put it on anything, really anything that you want. I even saw a recipe for a sauerkraut chocolate cake. I don't really know how that would be, but if you're feeling very adventurous, you can try something like that out. But after 2 weeks, you'll be able to enjoy it. Hopefully it'll taste really good. If it's not sour enough for you after 2 weeks, you can actually wait another week and see what happens, but just remember to check on it. All right, so I'm gonna put this aside. I'm going to let it do its thing, and then hopefully in 2 weeks, I'll be enjoying some sauerkraut, and I hope you all do the same. Thank you for joining me today.